Hey guys, Adam aka Atheist Radical here. So, let's talk about Black Panther, shall we? Extremely overhyped, absolutely not worth my time. Blah blah blah. Okay, I'm just kidding. Um, Still overhyped. Still definitely overhyped. I watched it. I'm recording this Monday morning as I'm, getting ready for work here. I watch it on Saturday, so I've had a couple of days to mull over things. It's not a bad movie. I will absolutely say that. It wasn't nearly as underwhelming as I thought it would be. I actually had a feeling that I'm like, wow, this might be actually like a lot. Like I sat there thinking, okay, if this thing can at least get to an 8, I'll be happy. But I kind of expected like at best a 7 out of 10 movie, just because I felt with all the extreme hype that was being put around it, with all the political connotations that were being put around it, that it just wasn't going to live up to whatever it had. Now, if you ask me, did it live up to all the expectations that people were putting on it? Absolutely not. It is still nowhere near one of the better Marvel movies. Anybody who sits there and tells you that this is one of the better Marvel movies they've put out is looking at it through rose-colored lens, That's my opinion on that. It's not a bad movie, but it's not a great movie. There's still a few things that it's missing. It didn't quite grab me in the way that other movies like, say, Deadpool, like Guardians of the Galaxy, like Captain America Winter Soldier. There's just a number of movies that do such a better job of getting me invested and engaged in what's going on than Black Panther, and that's the honest truth with me. So, I'll start with the obvious, character to go with, and that's T'Challa, aka Black Panther. I didn't have a problem with the acting that Chadwick Boseman does, but the problem that I have, and I guess this will relate to the plot, and yeah, there are spoilers going to be in this. I'm going to obviously put this at the top of the comments so everybody knows. I'm talking about the full movie here. The problem that I have the most with the movie is that it makes it really difficult for me to be fully invested in T'Challa as a hero that I'm supposed to get behind. And the reason for that I'll get into later when I talk about Killmonger. But a big part of it with T'Challa is that, let's be honest here, because his father died in Civil War and not this movie, you've already kind of had time to get over the sympathetic babyface of T'Challa being, this redeemable character. And the other problem with that as well is, he's not a Chadwick Boseman. I don't know if this is like intentional with how the character is. I'm not very familiar with Black Panther in the comics either, so I don't pretend that I know everything about what his character is like in the comic books. But from what I got from the movie, I sat there thinking like, man, like for a hero that we're supposed to be really getting pushed to get behind, he's not that interesting. He's very monotone. He's very one-dimensional in terms of his emotions. There's not a lot of difference between angry T'Challa and sad T'Challa. Like, when you see him in the Afterlife, I didn't get the feeling that there was, like, that much emotion. I felt like, it was still Chadwick Boseman kind of being the character he was before the Afterlife, and all somebody had done was paint a couple, was like, put a little bit of a water gun on his eyelids so that way, he could cry when he had to. So it was really tough. I found it really tough to get behind T'Challa in the entire movie. I actually found myself leaning much more to Michael B. Jordan's character. Sure, he has some pretty nasty intentions by the end of the movie, but at the end of the day, you kind of almost root for him more than you root for Black Panther, because Black Panther just really doesn't have that much going for him, like beyond his father dying. But that was his whole reason for trying to kill the Winter Soldier. That's when you get behind T'Challa, is when he's trying to avenge his father. Killmonger didn't kill his father. Killmonger, the worst thing he does is he kills T'Challa's, I think, what would we consider as Suri, or no, not Suri, or was it Zuri? I think it was. Forrest Whitaker's character. I think he was his uncle. And at the same time, I think so was Killmonger's uncle. I can't remember quite the family relations on that front. But it seemed like, that was the closest thing you had to something that really fueled T'Challa, and I still don't feel like he really put forward the emotion to make that count. So I found it extremely difficult to invest myself in the movie when it was really hard to invest myself with the main character. Now, the villain, on the other hand, Michael B. Jordan has been a tough actor for me to get into. I really did not get into Creed. Obviously, his last superhero, attempt, I guess we could say, is, in my opinion, the worst Marvel-related film I've ever seen. In the 2015, I believe, Fantastic Four. So, going into him being Killmonger, being a villain in a Marvel movie, I was a little nervous because I've had a really tough time getting into anything that Michael B. Jordan has done. And this is definitely his best effort forward. This is definitely the best movie that I've seen him in. This is definitely the best role I've seen him in. And the problem that, again, I have with this movie is that I spend more time cheering for Killmonger than I did for Black Panther, because Killmonger has some pretty good motivations for what he's doing. Obviously it gets skewed, but the reality is that, here he is as a black man, living what we look at as the typical black life, where you're living in a poor neighborhood, you're impoverished, you're fighting for scraps, essentially. And he, upon the realization of who he was, upon the realization of that, Wakanda basically did nothing to help him and has done nothing to help the rest of their ancestors that have moved on to other countries. That he's going to take revenge, and he's going to do what he believes is right, which is to take the technology and the weapons that Wakanda has been hiding all this time and giving it to those who he believes need it, which is that of black people that are living in nations where they're very poor, in nations where they're treated as almost second-class citizens, and we can take the political connotations, however we want. I mean, obviously there's statistics that can truly tell a story of what's actually going on, but that's not really the point in this one. There are motivations that, at least emotionally, you do understand. Politically, you may not agree, but emotionally, you do understand where he's coming from and why he's doing what he's doing. So, you take that into account. And obviously, he's violent in how he's committing these acts. I mean, obviously, he just went around and just shot... excuse me. He just went around and shot random people in an art gallery. I'm assuming that researcher that he was... or the curator that he was talking to died because he poisoned her or something like that. I'm assuming that's what happened. Obviously, it's really hard to like him when he's committing those kind of violent acts, but at the same time, he still ends up being very redeemable. He still ends up being very sympathetic. And that really works against T'Challa in what I believe is the biggest fuck-up of the movie. And what really is going to stick with me for a while is that when the challenge comes, that when, you see Killmonger show up in Wakanda and challenge for the right of the throne, he wins in a fair fight. I will repeat that. The villain wins in a fair fight. Generally speaking, this is coming from a guy, too, that watches professional wrestling, for example. The heel, or the bad guy, is not supposed to win fair the first time. If you want to have sympathy for the babyface, the good guy, if you want to be able to care about his redemption, about his revenge on the villain has to cheat, the villain has to be overpowered, the villain has to be doing something that makes your chance of winning impossible. The only advantage that Michael B. Jordan has is his combat experience. That is not overpowered. That is not like a Thanos Infinity Gauntlet kind of thing. That is not cheating. It's not like he kicked T'Challa in the balls. He won in a fair fight. How am I supposed to care about the hero's redemption when he loses in a fair fight? Yes, Michael B. Jordan, the Killmonger, is not a nice person, but he won the right to the throne fairly, to the point that even the outcasted tribe said, hey, well, was it a fair fight? And when they said yes, and he's like, why the fuck do I care? He obviously, it went fair and square. So it became very difficult at that moment. I mean, sure, you feel for his family, you feel for the people that care about him, but it was a fair fight. It's not like anything was wrong. I mean, sure, also we lost Zuri because, he sacrificed himself as like, preserve me, even though T'Challa was still thrown off the waterfall anyway. But that moment is going to stand out as a really short-sighted affair. If you want to have a redemption quest, like, the villain has to at least have cheated a little bit. Like, fuck, at least kick him in the balls, rake him in the eyes, do something. But instead, other than the fact that, yes, Killmonger is a violent, war-loving person who's going to basically fuck up the entire world by giving weapons from Wakanda everywhere. And especially in the hands of people that shouldn't have them. At the end of the day, he still won fair and square, and it's really hard to get on board with that. Now, at the end of the movie, I mean, at that point, I really had no horse in the race. Who's going to win, but my brain was like, okay, maybe at least, he'll survive, like, both of them will survive, and, they'll figure out how to get over things, and Killmonger will live to fight another day. No, he dies. He goes out, seeing the sunset, he said he would rather die than end up being what he believes all black people were, basically a slave and somebody who was just, put in chains, whatever else. Which is an understandable sentiment. But it was kind of the thing where it's like, I felt so underwhelmed by the conclusion of this one. I just didn't feel like anything was there. And by the end of the movie, I mean, there was a lot of cool things that happened. There was a lot of cool characters. There was a lot of stuff. But I just didn't leave the movie with that investment level, with that, oh man, that was so cool. Like, I just left going, yeah, it was all right. So we'll get on with some of the side characters here as I pull this up. Everybody, like, especially some of, like, my best friend who was fawning over this movie, he was telling me how much he loved Lupita as Nakia. And I've got to tell you guys, like, I don't know, man. Like, I did not care for Nakia that much at all. I really didn't. I didn't think there was really anything that she offered. I really did not care much for that character, for the ex, for, the person who's supposed to be like this strong, spy that, Wakanda has. I really didn't get much from her, I felt. She was really the one of the three women that were in the movie at the entire time that I just didn't get anything from. I didn't feel anything from. I was just like, oh, okay, this is a woman that I know has gotten plenty of Academy Award nominations. And I'm like, maybe you're suited for those kind of movies. Maybe you're just not suited for these blockbuster, action-packed films, because I just didn't feel any sense of, like, okay, she's cool. Like, no, I didn't really get that. I mean, her weapon was cool, but in terms of how she fit in the movie, I don't know. I don't feel like it worked. I mean, that's just my opinion. Some people are obviously going like, man, she was awesome. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't get a sense of just any care, really. Like, I was just like, man, it's just a character on the screen. Whereas you have Letitia, what was her last name? As I just pull this up because it's easier. Letitia Wright as Shuri. She was fucking awesome. Like, as a guy who watches a lot of anime, like, she basically played the quirky scientist character, which I'm like, as an anime fan, you can never go wrong with the quirky scientist character. It always fucking works. It's always awesome. So I was so happy to at least have that character that I'm like, okay, this is going to work off really well with what I felt was a very monotone and a very one-dimensional T'Challa. So it ended up working very well. And she, I think, stood out the most. And yes, I am going to say that above, obviously, oh my god, was it Okaye? Or Koi? I think it was Okaye. This is the problem with, I should have done this yesterday when I at least had this in my head still. But, I can't remember the actress's name, but as far as I remember, I think it's Michonne from Walking Dead. I'm not a Walking Dead guy, but I I was told a million times, look for this one because, oh my god, Michonne is so good in this movie. She was good. She was definitely good. I mean, if you're looking for that badass, like, you don't fuck with this woman, obviously she played that character to a fucking T. I didn't get anything beyond that. Like, I just looked at her, I'm like, okay, you're the badass, cool. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's kind of what you want at the same time. Like, you want to have that kind of character involved. So, that didn't bother me as much. I was okay with that. Obviously, you would like to have a few more side characters because, I mean, realistically, in terms of all the side characters, Shuri and Okoye were the only two that I really got into. Martin Freeman's character, I was not into. I felt like he was just there to be something that you used at some point in the movie, and obviously he did, being the pilot, so that way he could shoot down some of the ships that were carrying the weapons. So, I mean, he had his use, but I didn't feel like he added anything. I think he only served to be the quote-unquote token white guy that you could take shots at. And this is the one part of the movie that I am going to talk a little bit about politics. I didn't want to, but there was one little thing that has been relayed into real life that people want to do that's going to start really bugging me. And that, obviously, that was the barking at a white person. The colonizer thing didn't bug me that much because, I mean, obviously these people have not left Africa and they understand what happened. That doesn't bother me. What bothered me for sure was the barking at him because, as a white man, he shouldn't be talking. I don't know if that's necessarily the connotation of what happened, if the color of his skin really defined why the outcast tribe didn't talk to him. It could just be that he wasn't one of the tribe. It could just be that he wasn't from Wakanda. However, what has happened is that there are people now, and yes, I will say, there are black people now that are like, you know what, let's do this in real life to real white people whenever they try to speak. And to which I said again, I've said this so many times, I don't know how much on my YouTube channel I've done it, because obviously, I'm a lazy piece of shit and didn't make a lot of videos before this. But I've said it so many times, if you are going to play the game of you're looking for equality, if you're going to play the game of wanting equality down the board, if you're playing the morality card, you don't get to do shit like that. If you want to talk about equality, you don't shoot down a white person just because you think that they shouldn't be having... If you think that a white person shouldn't be allowed to speak, let's just go with that. If you think that they're not allowed to speak, then that's not equality anymore, is it? So, when you have these people that are fighting for, equality when it comes to racism, equality when it comes to sexism, equality when it comes to sexuality, whenever you try to shoot somebody down because of the color of their skin, the gender they hold, the sexuality they believe that they are, obviously then you no longer get to play the morality card. You don't get to say that you're playing, with good morals. You can't say that you're being the good guy here anymore, because now you're trying to take away somebody's free speech. And the idea that there are people that are going around and thinking that because they thought it was so cool that a bunch of black people barked down a white person for speaking, that's something that they should do in real life, now you're only making your case worse. Because if anybody's been noticing lately, it's starting to finally be on the flip side that people are starting to get sick and tired of all this bullshit. So, it's at the point where I think we need to take a step back and start looking at things and being like, all right, maybe it's time that we start just talking. And when you have people that are thinking that now if I just suddenly talk to a black person and all they're going to do is bark at me, how is that going to help anything? How is that going to help us evolve? How is that going to help us get past whatever issues that we apparently still have? If we can't talk, we cannot evolve. If we cannot have a dialogue, we will never get past the past that we are trying to get rid of. The past will always be in the rearview mirror. We will always be looking at it, and we should never be looking into the past. We should always be looking forward. And I feel like there are some people taking what this movie was to them and using it as another way to continue their hate speech. And I guess that's where I'm going to kind of leave things off here, and that's what I truly believed about the politics of Black Panther. I'm actually impressed that the political game was not as heavy as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be far worse. I really did. There is a bit of the connotation of black history in terms of white people, taking advantage of them, the slavery epidemic from like, obviously the 1800s and such. But it was not nearly as prevalent as I thought it would be. And I was very impressed. I was really happy with that because I didn't want to watch a movie that was just going to be anti-white and pro-black. I have no problem with the movie being pro-black, but I didn't want the movie to also be anti-white. And I feel like it did some damage, but it didn't do enough that I could really sit there and tell you that this movie was extremely racist or whatever else. I don't think I could go remotely that far. So I'm very happy with that. What I will say though is, again, because of the overhype, because of all this ridiculousness from people that wanted to talk about this movie being the greatest thing, that talking to be the greatest moment for black people, it's like, look guys, like, this is cool. It's very cool that we finally got a movie like this. But I don't look at this as like some cultural achievement. And this is coming from somebody who's not trying to be like biased because I'm not black. I'm literally looking at this as objectively as I can. And my question to any black person would be is, how is this one of the greatest achievements in the history of black people? And we're not even talking anymore about Obama being president. How are we acting like this all of a sudden? Like Black Panther is the big thing. You were president. You had a black person in the presidency for 8 years, and no one's talking about that anymore. Why? Because the moment's over now, so it's time to move on to be a victim for something else? And again, I'm going to say this too. Black Panther's not the first black superhero movie. Blade. I mean, sure, is Blade a superhero? I mean, that's questionable. But Blade is a Marvel franchise. But nobody talks about that because, again, it doesn't suit the narrative. And just like with Ghostbusters, just like with The Last Jedi, with J.J. Abrams' recent comments about how people are afraid of women if they don't like The Last Jedi, the fact that there is anybody out there that thinks you're racist because you don't give the most like amazing review of Black Panther is just insane. And I think that a movie like this has caused another shift, another unnecessary, protest for something that just doesn't exist. There are not, like, if there are people that really are going to make bad reviews just because it's a bunch of black people in a movie, then let them do it, because you know what? It's not going to affect shit. Clearly it hasn't affected shit because Rotten Tomatoes still has this movie at a 97. And it does not deserve that rating. I'm sorry to say this, but are you telling me that 97% on Rotten Tomatoes makes this one of the best movies ever made? Are you telling me that Black Panther is one of the greatest movies in existence since the day film began? No, it's not even fucking close. It's not even, like, I'll tell you right now before I even bring up the list, it's not even in my top 10 of Marvel movies. Actually, you know what? I should rephrase it. In terms of Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, it's top 10. But in terms of Marvel-related movies, no, it's not. It's not even close. It's, and again, it's not to say it's a bad movie, but it just isn't a memorable movie. It's not a bad movie. It's a very polished movie. The problem is it doesn't do anything that's going to make me go back and watch it a second time. It's not going to have something that I'm going to remember. It just exists. It's a good movie that I enjoyed for the time that I watched it, but it's not something that I'm going to take with me as something that I keep going back to in conversations. I'm not going to talk about Black Panther in the way that I still talk about Deadpool, that I still talk about Logan, that I still talk about the original Avengers, Captain America, Winter Soldier, and First Avenger, Ant-Man, fucking, all these movies. Guardians of the Galaxy. For God's sakes, I knew nothing about Guardians of the Galaxy, and I will still go back to those two movies, even though I know nothing about them. I still don't know anything about the fucking comic franchise. I don't know a thing. I just know that it's a funny goddamn set of movies so far, and I can't wait for the third one when it comes out. I think it's 2020, I think? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, so let's just get to it, all right? Black Panther is a good movie. It's not a great movie. It's not a bad movie. It's a good movie. It does exactly what it needs to do. It is an action-packed movie. It has enough of a solid cast to not be debilitating. It just suffers from not having anything memorable, and it suffers from not being special to me. There wasn't a reason for me to get invested. There wasn't a character that really had me like constantly paying attention. Like Shuri was the closest I got, but she wasn't in there as much as I would have liked. Killmonger ends up being more likable than T'Challa, and there just wasn't anything memorable. Like, I'm not going to sit here and call back any specific scene from the movie beyond the barking. So I still am very generous with this movie because, you know, when I look at how I rated a lot of other Marvel movies, there's still some real good things to say about it. And considering some of the flaws in a lot of other films, there's still a lot going on for it. So let's take a look at the list as we kind of scroll the way up here. Obviously, there's a lot of shit at the bottom. And then when we get to about, you know, the halfway point, we're around 16, 15, you know, it's starting to get to that point where it's so good. And then once you get, like, the top 10, I don't know, you just can't touch. Black Panther just can't touch what's up there. So at the end of the day, I decided to put this at an 8 out of 10 rating, and the placement is going to be 13th, just above Age of Ultron. Age of Ultron was still a fun movie, but it had a lot of glaring flaws. And that's what kind of Black Panther is. It's a fun movie, but it has some glaring flaws. Not as bad as Age of Ultron, so it's good enough to be above that. If I took away, you know, the 3 Marvel-related films that are above it, then it would be 10th. It would be a top 10 movie in the cinematic universe. And that's nothing to scoff at. There's only a couple I can count of from the cinematic universe that are really bad. I mean, generally speaking, I don't even know if I could really say that any of them are like terrible. They're just not good. They're just average. So it's not to say that Black Panther is a bad movie, and I have to keep stressing this because I know what's going to happen. There's going to be somebody that watches this and be like, oh, you're a fucking racist. You thought this is a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. It just doesn't do anything to get me fully invested, and it doesn't do anything to be memorable. I think it's just, I mean, unless you're going to talk about how it's an all-black movie, if that's what it's memorable for, then I don't think the movie did its job. If you're looking at the color of the skin of the actors as like the memorable part of the movie, then no, the movie didn't do what it was supposed to do, which is to get you invested. So that's just how I feel on the subject. If you agree with me, that's awesome. If you disagree with me, that's fine. You know, but I don't want to see comments that are just like, oh, you're racist, because that doesn't help. That's not criticism. That's just you mad. If you really think that the movie's really good, in the comments below, tell me, like, what really got you going? You know, I'd love to hear, you know, why you thought maybe T'Challa was actually a lot more of an investable character than I did. I'd love to hear why you thought Nakia was much more interesting than I thought she was. So, you know, tell me what you want to say, and I'm happy to respond back. Because, you know, I love talking about this movie, and I love talking about Marvel in general. They've always been good movies. I've really never been steered wrong by a Marvel movie. I've just been leaving some of them, and in the case this was one of them, where I'm just like, it was good. I'm not probably going to go back and watch it. I'm probably not going to have callbacks to what the movie did, but it's still a serviceable film. So, with that being said, I don't think I really have anything else to say, do I? I'm just trying to go back into my brain and think if there was anything that I missed. I mean, obviously, there's not much to scoff at with the end credits. I mean, obviously, we just see Bucky waking up finally. So I guess we're setting up for everybody coming back together for Infinity War, which is cool. I can't wait for May. May's going to be insane. Jesus. Deadpool and Infinity War. God damn. This is going to be fun. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. And like and subscribe, obviously. All that shit, man. I just talked for like, I'm assuming 30 minutes on that. I really hope that this doesn't get taken the wrong way. I really don't. Man, I really wanted to love this movie. And I still like it, but it didn't do enough. And I just hope to God that people don't go nuts about it, because I know that there are going to be some people that do, because people can't help themselves. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next video.